Okay, thank you everyone and welcome to the Wednesday, February 4th, 2026 Finance, Assessment, and Taxation Committee meeting. I am the chair, Megan Keegan, and with me today we have Councilmember Deirdre Brody, Councilmember Arthur Lumpkin, Councilmember Ginny Farrell, and Councilmember Alfredo Ballerin. We are also joined by staff Robert Wenner and Carly Johnson, Councilmember Tom Hoey, Acting Commissioner of Administrative Services, Miriam Dixon, and City Assessor Trey Kingston. We are here to discuss several pieces of legislation, including Ordinance 2/2126, Local Law B of 2026, Local Law C of 2026, and Resolution 51226R. We are going to take our agenda out of order because City Assessor Kingston does have to leave for, I believe, correct? You have child care issues. So come on up. We're going to start out with talking about Local Law B of 2026, a local law amending Article 3, Senior Citizens Tax Exemption of Chapter 333, Taxation of the Code of the City of Albany to allow for the signing of an affidavit to replace the filing of annual renewal applications for property owners who have received the tax exemption for 5 consecutive years. And I just want to note that this sort of is playing in tandem with Local Law A, which did pass the body on Monday evening. Councilmember Hoey, you're the sponsor of the bill, so if you would like to hop on and just provide a basic explanation of the legislation and its intent.
Sure, thank you, Chair Keegan. The whole idea of this, in discussions with Trey, is that a lot of elderly people, especially as they get up there in years, forget about filing yearly for the exemption. And what this legislation would allow, that after 5 years of filing and being approved for the exemption, they would no longer have to file again. And especially, like I said, as you get older, you forget, or somebody who's helping you with your stuff might not realize it. So we felt that this is a really good way that we'd be able to approach this problem of people not filing in time and having to wait another year to get the exemption. Thank you.
And Assessor Kingston, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Yes, please. On a similar note, it's true. The filing process for this exemption is cumbersome, especially for people in the age range that we're talking about. They are required to annually submit to us the previous year's federal tax return, which gets confusing because right now we're in 2026, but what the state is looking for is their 2024 tax return. And I can't tell you how many people rush out on January 1st, file their 2025 taxes because they think they need it, then come in only for us to tell them we actually need your 2024. They need to give us a copy of all out-of-pocket medical expenses for the prior year. Again, prior year is really 2 years prior. Copies of bank statements, Social Security, 1099s. There's a lot of things. Now, there's a lot of individuals who receive this exemption who are more than capable of processing this information for us, but there's also a lot who might be the biggest, most cumbersome thing that they handle all year. There is no wiggle room. If we don't have the required documentation by the due date, the exemption would be removed, which would double their taxes. And that could be a catastrophic event for these individuals. Just in the last week, we have actually had 2 individuals transferred to us from the Treasurer's Office, and both of them had simply forgot to file last year, and we were able to verify the fact that they were on our January mailing, our February 1st reminder, March 1st reminder, April 1st reminder to renew this. But it just went by the wayside, and now we have individuals who not only didn't receive the exemption, but aren't going to be able to pay their taxes and have to plan going forward. So what this would do is allow those exemption, the people that receive this benefit, to only have to sign an affidavit after they have qualified for 5 consecutive years. You know, there would be the aspect that, there is the aspect that we're not seeing any proof, but I can tell you after looking at these applications for over a decade, short of somebody selling a vacation home, we never see a change in the income in a way that would bump them out of this exemption. So it would save a lot more than what we're risking for taking people at their word. And if the affidavit is seen to be not truthful, there is a penalty, a civil penalty. I think it was $100. But they also would lose all New York State property tax exemptions for a period of 5 years. So there is a penalty that it's not just we trust you, end of story. There is something at stake if they're found to be lying.
Okay, thank you. Do we have questions from committee members? Councilmember Brody.
Thank you for being here tonight and for helping us understand all of this. I think in the vein of making this easier for folks to remain in their homes, age in place, and affordably, I'd love to understand also as a follow-up to this, how we could message this out to the community in a way that if this passes, we're making sure that folks who are potentially impacted by this are very clear on what they don't have to do going forward and are clear on what they are still obligated to do going forward. Is that something more of that your office would handle, or would there be others involved?
It's something that I would handle. And I don't, to be honest with you, I haven't contemplated anything other than the law does require that we mail anybody who has previously received the exemption on the prior assessment roll a renewal application 60 days prior to the due date. So that's January 1st. So my initial plan, but I'm open to doing anything, would be to write a letter for that renewal mailing in January explaining you've had this exemption for 5 years, so you no longer need to provide us with your financial information, but rather return the attached, which will be the affidavit that we'll draft up.
So you can tailor that communication to expressly the group of folks who would be potentially
Yes.
exempt.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Valorem.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Trey, for coming down again tonight. Do you have an idea of how many residents would fit that currently, who've already done it for more than 5 years? And would those, are we going to start day one once this passes, or those who've been consistent for the last 5 years would now be able to take advantage of this benefit?
So that the law is not clear on that, and I interpret this section that we'd be looking to adopt. It just says those who have received the exemption for 5 previous assessment rolls. So it's my belief that we would be able to initiate that next year. Yep.
So are you indicating that you want to propose amend language to the existing bill to ensure that that is the case?
I'm not sure that we have the ability to do that.
Well, you wouldn't, but Mr. Hoey would.
We have to, the real property tax exemptions, the language, they're all found in Article 4 of the Real Property Tax Law. And we can pick and choose which sections we want to adopt, but I'm not sure that we have the ability to, change what's in what we are adopting. It's a kind of a similar issue that we were speaking to yesterday on what we consider income. But I mean, I'd be happy to, talk to the council's counsel as well as corporation counsel, because I have contemplated the question that was just asked, and it's my understanding that it's relatively clear that this wouldn't start our 5-year clock, that we could, if this were adopted, anybody who had received this exemption for 5 consecutive years would qualify for the affirmation next year.
Okay, that was going to be my question. So thank you for clarifying. Councilmember Hoey.
Yeah, thank you. Trey, do you mind, like, telling them, you're running these workshops, and I know I got one in the 15th Ward set up, and 14th Ward. Can you talk about, well, you do a flyer, and we put it out through our neighborhood association. I know Melrose put it out, and some other neighborhood associations put out on the flyer about the workshops. I call it a workshop, but it's where people can file for these exemptions. They don't have to come down to City Hall and see Trey. It's like bringing the assessor's office to different parts of the city. And my question for you, Trey, can you tell the committee how many people have come and used these, the workshops that I'm talking about?
Yeah, so it's different neighborhoods have different turnout, but we have been, prior to New York State's exemption application acceptance period, which is January 1st to March 1st, we were going around town to every library as well as the Italian American Center. I think we did one at the Hibernian Hall, just anywhere that would really take us, educating the public about assessment and the exemptions we have. Ever since January 1st, we have a total of 12 scheduled. I think we've had 6. We're going to have our 7th tomorrow, and then we will be at 916 Western Ave on Monday. And we've been having probably 20 to 40, I think the average is about 32 people show up at these locations rather than coming down to City Hall. That is, I think, a lot to do with City Hall's not an easy place to get to and to park, especially I imagine that there's a good percentage of the people applying for this who it might be completely unattainable to really take the time and the effort to park and get in here. So they've really been utilizing these workshops, as Councilmember Hui called them, and we do collect a lot of sensitive information, and there are a lot of seniors who aren't comfortable putting that sensitive information in the mail or in email. So a lot of them do come to City Hall personally to drop it off, but we've seen a decrease in seniors coming down to City Hall, but they're still doing it in person. They're just doing it at our satellite locations.
And Trey, if this law did pass, you would use that opportunity like next year and the year after to advertise that, look, you've done this for 5 years, or you have 3 more years to go, and that would be another vehicle that we could use to get the word out.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that we would still be wanting to have these events, because ever since we did the 2024 revaluation, we've just seen that being out in the public alleviates a lot of stress and confusion. But I think that we'd get a lot more mail and email, because we're not going to be collecting sensitive information. We're not going to be collecting 1099 from Social Security or federal 1040s that are just littered with Social Security numbers. So we have no plan to utilize something like this in order to not be out and about in the community. I just think that it would alleviate a lot of the concern that the seniors have sharing sensitive information like this.
Are there any other questions? Councilmember Farrow?
I move that we move local law B of 2026 through the committee with a positive recommendation.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we're going to discuss, do we have the individual who is here to discuss the National Grid easement? Okay, come on up. We're going to discuss Ordinance 2/2126, an ordinance authorizing and directing the grant of a permanent easement over a portion of city-owned property at 5 Mill Road, tax map parcel number 75.00-2-8 to Niagara Mohawk Power Corporation for upgrades to the Normanskill Gas Regulator Station project. And if you could just introduce yourself.
Of course, Martha Moskowitz, Senior Assistant Corporation Counsel.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I didn't announce you on the record before. I didn't recognize you. I don't think we've met before. So can you just walk us through the purpose and intent for this legislation?
Niagara Mohawk has an existing gas regulator station on site at 5 Sawmill Road that's due for updates. In order to do these updates and improvements, they've requested a permanent easement over a tract of land. I think it's 0.02 acres. There's a few accompanying land agreements that go with it. A marshalling station, they're asking for like a lease or it's probably a lease for use of an area to help them sort of stage the improvements. And there's a couple of little parcels around where they're trying to make the improvements. It seems to go hand in hand with another easement that was given last year in April. There was an easement on the same parcel given to the gas provider. So there'll be 2 easements over this this parcel. It doesn't seem particularly exceptional. I'm sort of absorbing this issue from our recently departed our Deputy Corporation Counsel, Brett Williams. So as far as land use concerns, you can ask me. I might know, might not.
Any questions? Councilmember Farrell.
I just wanted to make sure, because it looks like it's at the Norman Side Farm.
That's right.
And I'm not expecting that there's going to be any negative impact to the park or any of that business there.
If you look at and some of the stuff I sent, the easement, the temporary easement in the marshalling station do butt up against the community garden, and it looks like there's part of it that might run right into the edge of the trail right before the walking trail scoots into the road. I talked to the Niagara Mohawk easement contact, and he didn't seem concerned that it was going to impede upon the residents' use, but if you needed, he was amenable to providing a letter of some kind if anybody had some concerns about the dog walking or the garden or anything.
The hiking trails were impacted by the gas line, that I do know from, because I hike there with my dogs.
Yep.
And had to find a new hiking spot because you could not traverse even down through the trails around where the gas lines were going through, because it went all the way from essentially the golf course all the way through to the road. They had to dig up for that line, which understandable. It was work that needed to be done. Just noting for the record that there was some disruption to use of the park, but I believe the intent was to put everything back and have those trails be reopened, so.
And just out of curiosity, if it turns out that there is some sort of disruption to the park, does the city have any recourse to take back the permanent?
The permanent easement, no. It's not transferable. It's something like a lease could be terminated. We probably wouldn't. It would be very impractical, of course, to say that we're terminating your lease to use this marshalling station for your equipment. But because it's temporary, and I think they want to be good neighbors, we could talk to them about the outline or the parameters of the space they want to use.
Any other questions from community members?
So the easement would be permanent, but I just want to make sure I understand, what the work they're doing is temporary, or are they requiring this for ongoing maintenance beyond?
The project itself is estimated to take a year and change. It looks like for the marshalling area, so, but the equipment itself is permanent. The gas regulator station is there in perpetuity and meant to be maintained or improved upon as long as it's there. would like to alert the Finance Committee to one thing. I did ask that those two easements, the one from April of last year for the gas line, and this permanent easement that Niagara Mohawk is seeking have the same SBL number. I asked the Niagara Mohawk guy contact about it, and he indicated he would get back to me about potential interference. Because you can't have interfering permanent easements. We can't grant a permanent easement each to two separate entities necessarily. But I haven't heard back yet.
I just also want to note, as someone who's in that park quite often, I believe the utilities are almost right across from Father Yusuf's garden. To your right is where all of the, I believe, the regulator and all of the utilities are. So if you're coming into the park, where the road, there's a road that you can go straight that will take you to the further into the community gardens and the entrance to the dog park, and then there's a road that you can turn right on, and the utilities are right on that corner, correct?
Yep. There should be some pictures. There's an appraisal, I believe. I don't know if it was forwarded as part of the easement materials, but there's an appraisal and a tax map for reference.
Would it be possible to get those before we vote on them just on the floor, not tonight? I think it's just important for us to see all of those things. I don't think it should necessarily hold back on us voting on that tonight, but I do like to make sure that we have all the materials.
Can I actually request what I think might be the easement? It's very hard to understand where it actually is in relation to the usable aspects of the park and the trails. So understanding if Niagara Mohawk or any of their folks can lay this on a map that can be understood.
Do you have like a drawn-on map that looks like somebody used a
Google map,
marker?
If they have a,
You have a,
this is, okay, well, maybe we should start to ask.
No, that's what we get from, that's just a standard for all assessment things. That's
Yeah.
the assessment maps, but that's standard for it.
I realize the standard for this, but I'm asking for this legislation if they want it to understand, and maybe it's not National Grid, or excuse me, Niagara, whoever the power company is nowadays, still call them NIMO, to lay this in a way that can be understood. I don't know where that is if I just look at that.
I might have more. I might have, he sent me a document that he sketched on.
That would be ideal.
Do you
Yeah.
have that?
No.
He made little drawings with rectangle shapes to show everything. Yeah?
I think knowing the proximity to the dog park, the garden, the hiking trails is totally reasonable. That's why I'm asking.
Councilmember Hoey?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Will there be any kind of protection around this regulator? Are they going to put up fence? Are they going to put up ballards so a car couldn't hit it and cause all that gas to spew out?
I don't know about spewing gas, but I believe a fence is part of it. I'd have to check though. I'd have to read the proposal again. I've forgotten.
Thank you.
And I just will note that the utility structures themselves are already sort of contained within a structure. So they're, again, for anyone who hikes there regularly, like you know exactly what you're looking at in the juxtaposition of where the utilities are versus where everything else is. And they are sort of separated to a certain extent. I want to say maybe roughly 50, 75 feet from the farthest fence of the dog park, and then with the road width probably 20 or 30 feet from the Father Yusuf garden, which is separate from the community garden that people are growing food in. That's past the dog park all the way towards the back. So there's a road kind of separating and then grass space separating the utilities where the utilities are to the right. And from what I recall, those utilities are in sort of, they're in physical structures like brick, not brick, but concrete block structures with all the hazard stuff on the outside.
I'll note also for the committee that our attorney Martha Mahoney has just started and is taking over issues of land transfer for Corporation Council. So she's got all the material. She couldn't be here tonight, so I'm filling in, but she'll have all the material and we'll be able to field things. She has more land use experience.
Okay, so just so we have for the record, I believe the committee is comfortable moving on this evening with the caveat that when we go to vote on the 19th, we're requesting that updated information, the additional maps, I believe you had an assessment or appraisal done on the value, which I don't believe we quite have yet. So as long as all that information is received by the council before the meeting that we have upcoming on the 19th, we should be able to move on the ordinance.
Okay.
So do I have a motion on this one?
I move that we move ordinance 2/21/26 out of the committee with a positive recommendation contingent upon receiving said information.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilmember Lumpkin. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Hey,
Sure.
okay, sorry. So moving on to local laws. Well, we have staff here, so we'll do local law C afterwards. It's fine. We'll move on to resolution 512.26R. So Miriam and John, if you would like to come up. You guys don't mind doing that out of order so they can go home. So we are going to be discussing now ordinance 5.12.26R, a resolution, or I'm sorry, not ordinance, resolution 5.12.26R, a resolution of the Common Council approving a transfer of budgeted funds and a change in the authorized positions included in the 2026 budget, which will affect a salary rate or salary total. For those of you who are just joining in, we discussed this at our last finance meeting. This particular bill has to do with the decision to appoint a commissioner of recreation. Traditionally, I believe since the time of Mayor Jennings, the Commissioner of Youth and Workforce Services and Commissioner of Recreation was a shared title, with that salary being split between two different departments. And the incoming administration has determined that they would like to actually have a commissioner for youth and workforce services and a commissioner for recreation. The commissioner for youth and workforce services, again, so folks have an understanding, the creation of this position is not as significant a hit to the budget as the full commissioner salary, because the move to create the commissioner position in our youth and workforce services is reimbursable. And so it is really the differential in that 50% salary that we have to look to make up the gap. We expressed concerns at the last meeting We did not want to see this come out of contingency funds. We sent this back to the administration to work through, and we have received updated information, and that could not be passed because Councilmember Farrell is the sponsor of the bill, and it would have required amendments to the actual bill language. She's here with us this evening, which means that we can actually move forward with those amendments. So without further ado, I'm going to let you guys.
Actually, just because I was unable to be at the last meeting, I did want to speak about this one as, although I was not able to speak on the other budget pieces where I would have had interesting things to say. This one I was very pleased that the Players Administration wanted to do this. It has never made any sense to me to have workforce development and parks together. It's like having HR and engineering together because HR is housed in a building. And I think it completely hampers workforce development to be tied to parks. One of my colleagues, when I watched the meeting, said that both departments were doing incredible, and why would we need to separate them? And I would say that they absolutely, Commissioner Jones did a great job in representing those two departments, but the limited potential, particularly of workforce development, has hurt the city of Albany and has hurt our constituents. Our workforce development did the best it could. It should be a lot more, and it shouldn't just be about children. It should also be about adults. We have a lot of people in poverty in the city of Albany. The best way to combat that is workforce development. So from my perspective, this is something that should have been done a long time ago. It is an absolute disservice of the Jennings administration that they combined these two departments under one commissioner. And it was something that was literally a fluke. It was like one person was doing one and kind of wanted to do the other, so they put them together. We do a lot of crazy things in government because we did something at one point and it seemed like a good idea, and so you keep doing it. I mean, there's ridiculous laws all the time everywhere because of that. Supposedly you can't drink in movie theaters because there was a legislator at some point that got a little crazy in a movie theater, so they banned it. Just because a poor choice was made does not mean that we should continue doing that. So I agree with not taking the funds from contingency funds, but of all of the things, all of the budget issues, one of which I'm shocked got through the committee, but it did. Of all of the different budget things, this is the one that actually not only makes the most sense, but directly serves our constituents and our most needy constituents the most. So because I didn't get to speak on it at the last time, I really wanted to talk about that, because if you're not seeing a vision of how hampered workforce development is, then you need to learn a lot more about our city, because we need it badly, and we need a commissioner that's actually able to go and spend the majority of their time developing relationships with businesses, developing relationships, helping build programs, and it's hampered. It absolutely has been hampered because you're trying to build a park over here while doing this. And I would say on the other side too, we've had amazing things in our park. What other amazing things could we have if we actually had a commissioner that was dedicated to parks and all of the resources for parks, as is common, and not dividing their time between parks and another completely separate thing? I mean, it literally would be the same as, like, I don't know, parks and DGS. I mean, parks and DGS would actually make more sense, honestly. Two big jobs, but I wanted to say that because I think that it's really important to get on the record that we're talking about the finances. That's an incredibly important part of it, and I am incredibly worried about our finances. As I said, I was floored that one of the resolutions actually got through the committee. I didn't expect it to. But when something is a good idea, you figure out how that's something to prioritize in terms of cost. And this, from my perspective, is absolutely an important thing to do. So that's it.
And I just want to note for the record that the amendment that was made, if everyone looks, originally the plan was for this to come from budget line special items contingency. That has been changed to budget line corporation counsel salary, and the plan going forward is that a position will be removed from corporation counsel in order to create the commissioner position in recreation, correct?
That's correct, that is correct, council member.
I just wanted it reflected in the record because we do have to actually explicitly discuss what the amendment is. So, any questions? Councilmember Brody. Oh, you had your hand up. Sorry.
Thank you, and I would like to thank you for definitely hearing what we were saying last time. I got a ton of feedback from different folks before and after our last meeting that while we think certainly agree with what Councilmember Farrell said, we have an obligation to also responsibly pay for these things, and paying for ongoing personnel costs with contingency was not, I think, where at least some of us wanted to go. So removing that from the equation, I think, is a huge step forward. So thank you for understanding the need to budget with personnel service for new personnel with existing personnel service. A quick question on so there was originally 85 that was going to come from contingency. Now that's zeroed, so I appreciate that for sure. And the line that's being vacant has a salary range that's lower than the creation of the new, the splitting of the role, I should say. And the delta, it looks like, is being made up with the DOL grant. Is that, and that was the case before, is that still, because those numbers look like they also changed. I just want to make sure I've got the numbers correct.
No, so the workforce admin DOL JTBA, that is how they're paying for the Commissioner of Recreation salary. The recreation salary was reduced from 130 to 120, and 75,000 is being transferred out from Corporation Counsel. And that's why you're seeing the difference between the 85,000 to the 75,000.
Okay, and the transfer in for the original resolution was 80, as was the DOL.
Yeah, I'm not sure why there's a difference, the 80 in and 80 out for the.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
I can speak to that. So the difference is the timing. When we originally did this was in January, and we would have expected it to need to cover. So that transfer doesn't need, the full amount doesn't need to happen anymore because we've already paid Commissioner Jones. So this is to show the difference in the timing is why the number has changed. And I also just wanted to say that the grant covers the Commissioner of Youth and Workforce salary, not the Commissioner of Recreation.
That is correct.
Okay, so I understand the removing the personnel salary, the personnel resources out of the Assistant Corporation Counsel, and then based on that explanation, the current year vacancy not needing to be charged back, obviously, to that. In 2027, though, that number is going to have to come back up to pay that person for the entire year, right?
For the Department of Recreation?
Yes.
Yes.
But the DOJ grant would still cover it. So those numbers would be the same because a DOJ grant is for the entire year. So they're different because we're in February as opposed to January, but they would still,
For this year, I understand that.
but it's going to be the same every year because the DOJ grant is the same.
So I had some follow-up questions about that again. But go ahead if you want to.
No, just as a clarifying thing, because the DOJ grant is the same every year, so it's the expectation of that part will be the same. The other questions you have might be entirely
So
thing, but that part will always be the same.
we used to get 50% of the commissioner's salary reimbursed through the DOJ grant, but we used to pay the remaining 50% because it was split between two departments. So the difference that we are looking at in terms of salary expenditures is the 50% for one commissioner position, because the other commissioner position is entirely reimbursable, so we don't pay the youth and workforce salary, commissioner salary. So it's the split difference in the current shared commissioner salary becoming a single commissioner. So you're really looking at 50% impact to the budget, but you guys are making up the 50% impact to the budget by eliminating a staffing position in another department to make us whole.
That's correct.
I have a couple other questions.
Councilmember Brody.
Thank you. So again, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the changes between and what we're hearing tonight. So I appreciate you being patient with me. So the 120K salary for what will be the new recreation youth, just recreation, that's going to be 120K?
For the recreation salary, the full salary will be $130,000. If we're looking, look at 2027, if a person is on from January 1st, the full salary for recreation is $130,000. Half of that has already been captured in the budget because we were paying 50% of that, the city was, while the grant was picking up the other half.
So that, okay, so that, I was wondering how it fits in the range, but now I understand, because it's the total after FICA, health insurance, et cetera. It's not just the salary line, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Gotta make sure the maths. And as a follow-up question, I think with the world we live in and with the threats coming from, seems like every direction in the federal government, I think it's totally necessary to think through the likelihood of federal funds being either cut or at least threatened. We saw it just weeks ago with some of the most critical funding to TANF and childcare funding to our state in particular as I think a targeted action because of the values of our state. I don't think we're going to be immune to those that kind of barrage going forward. So I'd just love to understand a little bit more about this particular funding stream and basically to ascertain how, how stable it is and what I realize we don't have a crystal ball. I'm not asking anybody, and I hope none of this is actually a question in the future. But I would love to hear your thoughts on the stability of that and its potential to remain as is in out years.
That's tough. We definitely have been having conversations around those things that are funded in the city budget by a federal grant. But because of the very volatile nature, it's very hard to kind of say what we would plan to do with that. This area is one of our departments that is heavily dependent on that grant. So it's definitely something we're thinking about, but at this point, the full ideas have not been developed around what we would do with the loss of that funding.
And I will just note for the record that that department right now is only funded through May without passage of additional federal funding. And any cuts to that department would essentially impact the entire department. We'd all be having a conversation about staff reductions at that point. And I just want to note for the record that Special Counsel to the Mayor, John Riley, has joined us because I don't think I announced you at the beginning of the meeting. My apologies. Do we have any other questions about this particular resolution?
I just have one more question of the grant. Is this applied for on an annual basis, or what is the duration of the current grant?
I am not certain of how often we have to apply for the grant. We can definitely get that information back to you.
Thank you, I'd appreciate that.
Councilmember Ballerin.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess my question is, how does Corporation Counsel feel about losing the position? I know that over the last few years, we've talked a lot about retention in that department and trying to make sure we made some changes in our salary structure to be able to make sure we kept that department stable. So what are their perspective on this shift?
Appreciate the question, Councilman, and as an attorney, I certainly won't sit here and say the easiest thing to do is to remove another attorney from the city staff. I won't speak for the head of our law department, but in conversations, we are on board with this. The law department was down one attorney position at this level for the entirety of 2025, so we don't anticipate any major staffing disruptions due to this change. In terms of workload management, we do not anticipate any additional delay or issues related to having this position eliminated from their department, again, based on 2025 precedent.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Farrell.
I was wondering about the federal pieces and how Corp Counsel felt. And that's good to know, but I guess, so one of the things, and I just wanted to say this, and I should say first and foremost, I'm thrilled that this is not coming out of contingency because it just should not. I mean, that's not, we can't operate in that way for any salaries. But Corporation Counsel's office is something that the council and over the years has supported increasing the people in Corporation Counsel's office because overall a cost savings because we don't have to go out of Corporation Counsel's office for third party, but also we've increased a lot of important things like codes, violations, things like that. I know that this has not been, I know it's been vacant for a year, but my concern is even with that vacancy for a year, Corporation Counsel's office, that action of continuing forward on these different areas that do directly impact the lives of our constituents and how things operate, it would just be nice to know, to confirm that we're not expecting any changes in that. And also what will happen moving forward if it turns out that removing this position will impact those changes. I mean, from my perspective, that's a huge priority to ensure that that office continues to be aggressive in the areas that they've built up to be aggressive in.
Thank you, Councilmember. And, I'll just note I do have a very deep personal fondness for the department as well. So, these decisions are not made lightly. They're not made in isolation. Again, do not anticipate any direct impact to staffing or prosecution of codes cases or related matters, certainly. if it becomes apparent that we are seeing a reduction in the effectiveness of our legal services, we can revisit different cuts or cost-saving measures for 2027 to, reinstitute this position, certainly. But again, it is a priority of this administration and the law department to, continue to reduce reliance on outside costs in our law department. So that's something we will continue to pursue.
Great, yeah, and I guess we could call your dad if and complain to him, and he can give you a whole earful if we ever did anything Corp Counsel's office.
Well heard.
And I did want to reiterate, I appreciate Councilmember Brody bringing up the concerns of what happens at the federal government. I don't think that should change our choices here, because it is unfortunately entirely unpredictable what will happen next. But should that happen, which knock on wood it won't, as Councilmember Keegan said, I think that we're going to be in a lot of problems across the board, because we do have concerns in neighborhood services as well about the impacts of our federal grants. So thank you very much.
Any other questions about this legislation? Councilmember Hoey.
Yeah, more of a statement than a question. I fully support this. I think having Jonathan Jones, Commissioner Jones, in this position with the workforce development, I know him personally. I know he'll be looking for other grants, so I'm hoping that there'll be more money coming in once he gets into that role full-time. The recreation part, I think having Jamel there, I was co-sponsor with him on legislation where we're trying to come up with safe spaces for the children of this city, and recreation is one of the main areas for that. And I think, sometimes things are intangible. You don't see right away the savings and, what happens. But I think this move is probably one of the most important moves that we're going to make. And my last thing I want to say is that Jenny and Alfredo will remember in 2019, we were sitting here thinking about that we'd have to lay off 150 people from the city's workforce, and then COVID hit, and we didn't have enough people to work. So I know you got to kind of think ahead, but life is just so unpredictable. But I think if this passes, and I will be supporting it at our next meeting, if it comes out of committee, this is a good move, and it's a smart move. Thank you.
Anyone else?
And I just wanted to make sure that that we're clear, as passionate as I am about this, should we not get this the information ahead of time, the information on the outlines of the grant funding, like the time periods, things like that, we will not be voting on it in the next thing. We'll vote at the following meeting. So I just wanted to, as someone in leadership, I think it's really important at a committee meeting when something is promised, we don't vote until we actually receive that information, unless we get, sometimes that's not possible. And should that ever happen, then letting us know that it's not possible and why is also acceptable, but just want to make sure that you're aware of that.
Yeah, I wanted to note, though, that they did provide additional information in the legislative intent memo that explains the desire and necessity for the division of the departments and the intended purpose of the creation of the commissioner position, which we certainly appreciate, and is what we asked for at the last meeting. And then just the amended lines showing the differential in salary as a result of this being put in later. So the salary change for workforce admin was originally $80,000, it's now $75,000. And then the projected salary total for the commissioner is $120,000, with certain changes to FICA and health insurance. And then, of course, the line showing the elimination of corporation counsel instead of the use of contingency funds seemed to be everything that was amended from the original resolution to this resolution for the record, so that when we say that we're moving it pending amendment, those are the amendments that were put in. Correct? I miss anything? Staff? No? Okay. Do we have a motion on this? Councilmember Ballard.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a motion to move Resolution 5.12.26R with amendments with a positive recommendation.
Do I have a second? Second from Councilmember Lumpkin. All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the last part of this evening, which sort of forces us to skip around a bit. We are going to be discussing Local Law C of 2026. That is a local law amending section 42-263, annual salaries, elected officers of the Code of the City of Albany in relation to adding a majority whip position for the Common Council and the salaries of elected officers. I will note that this legislation was updated since originally being put in, and we are likely going to, where's Robert? Is Robert still here? I'm going to have to add that correct on the floor, because the local law C that we're reviewing tonight is not the original local law C that was introduced. We've added information into the fiscal impact section, so I'm going to have to amend that on the floor, correct? I'm seeing that in the bill. Oh, no. It's all on one page. Or no, it's in it, you're correct. I'm looking at the wrong thing. It's in the fiscal impact section. My apologies. So essentially, for those of you who are listening, we created an additional leadership position in the council. That's the majority whip position. It affects roughly $3,000 per year in salary. And then we noted and updated the legislative intent memo to demonstrate how the council is going to pay for that this year. We have vacancy savings from the violent prevention coordinator position, which is currently vacant, and that vacancy is enough to cover the salary cost altogether. We also noted that this will have no impact to FICA. It will impact $3,000 in the council's budget line item for 2027, and will increase our FICA line by $230 in 2027. Do we have any questions about the legislation? Go ahead.
So the violence prevention coordinator, that savings will cover the increase for this year. But I think in fairness, as I was pretty clear about needing to remain budget neutral in out years, it seems this will not do that. This will just add to our budget next year.
Correct, by roughly $3,230 next year. We do have the option of considering, as we're bringing on staff this year, how much we're offering in terms of that hiring salary, which can account for the $3,000 to remain flat. But I personally as the bill sponsor, cannot make those predictions.
Okay. I appreciate that. And when I say, I think what we were very clear with the mayor's office about multiple different salaries last time we met, I think it's only fair for us to turn that mirror on ourselves as well. And if they ask us to be budget neutral, not only in this year, but to not preemptively raise taxes on people next year, I think that would be the direction I'd like to see leadership go in considering how we do it next year as well.
Agreed, yes, thank you.
I have no issue with updating the legislative intent memo to reflect language that says that we will consider remaining within the salary cap in backfilling the 2 positions that we currently have open, and the hiring salaries that we decide will come up with some kind of language before our meeting in that section, so that, again, we're not bound to the legislative intent memo, but it at least reflects that it at least reflects that intent. And I will say, I did work with staff to make sure that the information that we were asking for from the administration was at least included in this bill, so that we were treating ourselves equitably to how we were treating the administration and the auditor's office on these issues. Do we have any other questions or concerns about local? Councilmember Hoy.
Yeah, thank you. The violence prevention coordinator position, I'm working on legislation right now where that would go under the mayor's office. So maybe when we switch that over, you know, everything's negotiation, of course. We can maybe get that 3,000 when that position moves over, cut off there.
Yeah, I would have to ask Gideon what the planned salary rate was, because somewheres I have the actual Excel sheet with from last budget session with the actual planned salary rates. So we can certainly ask for that, but we also are gonna have our, one of our legislative aid positions is going to be open, and we can also take a look at that particular position and what we offer that position within our salary cap to remain relatively neutral for next year. But I have no issue with adding that language to the intent memo, because I think that's fair, given that we were already considering a tax override, no matter what, just to keep up with the planned salary increases for unions this year.
Thank you.
Councilmember Vallerin, sorry.
Thank you, Cheryl. I think once we get into 2027 budget numbers and start looking at how to try to make it as budget neutral, we do have some other lines we can look at under contractual expenses and so forth that, you know, we can dip into to make the amount work. I mean, we do have to also take into consideration our total end number may go up even with finding these numbers, because the other staff that we have, we don't get any increases for the next 4 years, but our other staff do. So that number is going to just naturally go up, you know, even without this change. But I do think anyway we can make it neutral. We have some wiggle room, even without having to look at our current or potential future staff, without having to shortchange them. I wouldn't want to do that. I think we have some wiggle room in contractual expenses. And also this year, we don't know how long we're going to be with one staff, with our junior policy analyst vacant. We don't know how long that's going to be, so we may have additional savings under our line. Unfortunately, and this is the big issue with government in general, any anytime a department or us save money, that's great, but we don't get to use it next year. It goes into our fund balance, but that's a whole different subject. My point being is I'm comfortable that we'll be able to, one, absorb this with not just the savings we're going to get from not having someone in place right now for the violence prevention coordinator position, but also because we are going to have some type of a lapse between when we lose our junior policy analyst to when we bring someone aboard for our junior legislative aid. So I know we've talked about possibly giving someone, we have some idea, but there's going to be some other vacancies that we're going to have savings. And again, we also have contractual to make up the savings next year if we need to. So I just don't want to go right into saying, well, we can, whoever we bring in at a lower salary. I think we should bring people in and compensate them, especially at the entry level, so that they want to stay long term in our institution, for lack of a better word.
I just want to note, and I'm not going to announce the actual salary rate because I don't publicly, but there certainly is wiggle room between the minimum and current rates for all of those positions for us to be able to make decisions to stay within the salary cap. And just in reference to Councilmember Ballerin's comments about contracted services, most of that is technology services for which whatever it costs is what we have to pay in order to be able to access things like LexisNexis and Ecode 360. And we do that from a relatively fiscally responsible level because we limit the user access. I mean, we all have to go through staff because they didn't issue 15 logins, which would balloon the cost of those contracted services. So I wouldn't plan to be able to pull from those lines. I would expect those costs to go up.
I'm saying it's $3,000. I think we can figure it out between all of the different lines that we have under contractual expenses. We've got $100,550. I'm sure if we needed to, we can find the space between that and potential savings we can have between salaries. I just don't want us to go into bringing people in thinking we have to save these $3,000.
I don't think that we should have a detailed discussion about what's going into fiscal year 2027. What I'm talking about is adding language in here that would make the impact neutral to our salary cap for 2027. However that works, we'll figure that out in 2027. The intent of that is that we're going to remain within that salary cap. I mean, there are a couple of other things that would be coming under the council that we were not able to budget for this year. For example, the Commission on Disabilities is going to be under the council. We already had to borrow for that, and we, to date, do not know what it's going to require us in terms of additional costs to provide adaptive services to those board members at this point in time. And that would be assigned to our budget as an additional expense. We put $1,000 in because that's all we had. And we took from one of our, it was a budget neutral transfer to ensure that we could provide services as we are at least doing interviews. So, but my point was I'm fully comfortable updating the legislative intent memo to address the concerns about the out-year budget impact of this position. Any other questions or concerns about Local Law C this evening? Do I have any motions on this?
I'm pleased to make a motion to move local law C of 2026 out of the committee with positive recommendation.
Do I have a second? Second from Councilmember Lumpkin. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Do I get a motion to adjourn?
I'm pleased to make a motion to adjourn.
Second? Second from Councilmember Lumpkin. Meeting is now adjourned. Have a great night, everyone.